Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads. We continue with Kaya's Hero. Chapter 2, Lessons from a Basket. The next day, Kaya went to find Two Hawks, who was sitting outside of one of the lodges. Sometimes he sat there all day without moving, and Antelope High wrapped tightly around him. I know you can't walk yet, but I bet you can ride, Kaya said to him. Two Hawks frowned. He understood only a few words of her language. Kaya used her hands to speak to him. Do you want to ride with me? What to? He said. He learned the word for no right away. He shrugged, his lips turned down. With his hands he signed, leave me alone. But Kaya wasn't going to leave him alone. She been thinking about what Swan Circling had. Two Hawks was unhappy. Kaya's father had promised they would help Two Hawks get back to his people in the spring. That was a long way off. Since Two Hawks had been there, he hadn't smiled once. Kaya couldn't help him get home any faster, but she could be a better friend to him. She sighed to him, You can't just sit there. I'm going to get a horse for you. What to? He said again and shook his head. But the word no was a challenge to Kaya. She went to the chestnut horse she rode and another gentle mare. She put the light rope bits on them and led them back to where Two Hawks sat, his chin on his knees. Two Hawks, she called to him. She threw him to words. Let's go ride. He shook his head angrily. I can't ride, he sighed. My ankle is broken. He pointed to the splint that was bound in his ankle. You can do it, she sighed. I'll help you, she added, though she wasn't sure how she could get him onto the horse. The Two Hawks grimaced as if he was determined to prove her wrong. He pushed one foot, supporting himself with a crutch made from a cottonwood branch. Kaya led the gentle mare close to him. Two Hawks looked at Kaya darkly, as if to say, What now? She thought for a moment, and then she signed to him, Put your knee on my hands. I can lift you onto the horse. Two Hawks looked at the horse, then back at her. He shook his head. Did this stubborn boy think she wasn't strong enough to lift him? She clasped her hands and held them by his injured leg. After a moment, he gingerly placed his knee in her grip and grabbed the horseman with both hands. Now, Kaya said. She lifted. He threw his good leg over the horse's back and he was mounted. Kaya studied him. He wasn't grimacing with pain. In fact, he looked pleased. She climbed into her horse and beckoned for him to come with her. She thought of something Two Hawks could do while his leg healed. She threw him the words, We have to find an elderberry stick so you can make a flute. Overnight it had grown colder. A sharp wind whined around the lodge where Kaya and other children were dressing themselves after their morning swim. But the lodge was warmed by 5 fires lined up by the center, the smoke rising through the opening of the top. Kaya and Ista and other women were already cooking a morning meal because there was so much work to do that day. Kaya knew that soon friends and family would come from other villages nearby for the New Year's celebration. When the short winter began to grow longer again, people would share their news and give each other gifts. They'd feast and tell stories and honor Hanyawat, who made the seasons and held them in balance. Today, the women were putting up another lodge, one large enough to hold everyone for the feast. When Kaya joined them, she saw Swan Circling helping to rise one of the long lodge poles and set it the frame of teepee poles. Kaya thought the framework looked like the backbone and ribs of a skeleton of a huge horse. After the women completed the frame, they would cover it with tulle mats and hides. Kaya helped other girls carry the rolled up mats and place them near the builders. She kept Swan Circling in sight, hoping to have a chance to talk to her again. When the lodge finished, Kaya followed Swan Circling to another lodge where women were preparing more food, so there would be enough for the visitors. Ista and Running Alone were making pemmican, a mixture of dried meat and berries. With a stone pestle, they were pounding dried deer meat in one of the large mortars. When one of them got tired using of the heavy stone pestle, they traded places. Kaya thought the steady thump 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 sounded like a heartbeat. Swan Circling joined the women, and Kaya went to peek at Light on the Water, who was snug in her tea cuss. "Would you mind giving my baby a piece of this dried meat?" Running alone asked Kaya. "She's getting a new tooth, and she needs something to chew on." She turned back to her raking strips of meat and putting the pieces into the mortar to be ground fine. Kaya broke off a bit of the meat and held it to Light on the Water's lips. But the baby pressed her lips tightly, her eyes merry as she and Kaya were playing a game. "Isn't she precious?" Kaya exclaimed, and she glanced at Swan Circling. Cayusta had said it was sad that she had no children yet. Did she mind that Kaya was making a fuss over the baby? Swan Circling was using a large pestle. Her strong arms gleamed with sweat after the hard work. "When I saw you girls in the stream this morning, I thought of the time when I was your age," she said to Kaya, caught her eye. Do you like to swim?" "Uh-huh," Kaya said. "So do I," Swan Circling said. "I come from a place where the Snake River joins the Big River. My friends and I swam every chance we got. My mother called us fish girls. Someday I'll show you my favorite places to dive from the cliffs, Kaya." "You're always thinking of the future, aren't you?" Ista said to Swan Circling. "Many times I've heard you say someday this or someday that." "It's true," Swan Circling said. She smiled at Ista, who was her good friend, and passed her the pestle. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Do you often think of what's to come, Kaya?" Kaya was thinking that no one had ever asked her as many questions about herself as Swan Circling did. Kaya liked that. "I'm thinking of my horse again," Kaya said. "Mostly I think of getting my little sister back, but I don't know how I can do that." "When a way opens, you'll be ready," Swan Circling said with confidence. "I saw you riding with Two Hawks yesterday. I don't know how you persuaded him to get on a horse, but you did. You looked as if he was in a much better mood. You have a strong will, Kaya, and I'm glad you think of the needs of others." Kaya gently rocked the baby in the tea cuss. Lulled by the emotion and the voices of the women, Light on the Water was falling asleep. Oh, how Kaya wanted to be the girl Swan Circling believed her to be, and she feared that she wasn't. "Pay attention, I have something to tell you," Kaya used to say to Kaya and the other girls, and women who were gathered around making beads. On these long winter evenings, when the wind howled like a pack of wolves, they stayed close to the glowing fires in the warm lodge. Cayusta never missed a chance to teach the children with stories or legends. She was a wonderful storyteller and acted out the different parts with her hands and her low musical voice. Cayusta held up a blanket made of cedar bark. "Here's a blanket traded to me by one of our friends in the West," she said. She told a story to go with the basket. "A story how Cedar Tree taught them basket making," she continued. "Listen, and I'll tell you." Kaya sighed with pleasure. She glanced over her shoulder at Swan Circling, who was twining a basket as if she was listening to the others. Swan Circling caught Kaya's glance and nodded as if to say, "Yes, I love to listen to stories too." It was so, my children, that a long time ago all the animals, plants, trees, and creatures could walk and talk the way people do," Cayusta began. "In these long ago days, Gray Squirrel was a girl, like all of you. But she was a little slow in her thoughts, and she was clumsy too. Day after day, she sat alone under a cedar tree. Cedar Tree began to feel sorry for Gray Squirrel and decided to help her. He couldn't allow her to grow up without learning what a girl needs to know. Wise old Cedar Tree sent Gray Squirrel to pick bare grass, dry it, and put it into bundles. And he told her where to find dyes and how to cut and dry his own roots to make cedar strips. When she had all the materials she needed to make a basket, he asked her how to weave it. She was so proud of her work. But Cedar Tree told her to dip the basket in the stream. Was it woven tightly enough to hold water? When the water ran out of her basket, Gray Squirrel hung her head and cried. Don't cry, little girl, Cedar Tree said. Cayusta made her strong voice strong and low, the voice of a wise old tree. He told her she'd have to practice, and in order to make the basket successfully. Then he sent her out to look for designs to weave into her basket. Gray Squirrel went looking. Rattlesnake gave Gray Squirrel the zigzag design on his back. Mountain gave her the design of his peaks and valleys. Grouse gave her the design of his track marks. Stream gave her the design of his waves. To find all these designs, Gray Squirrel had studied the world so closely that now she was much, much wiser. Gray Squirrel wove a beautiful basket with all the designs she had been given. And when she dipped it into the big river, her basket didn't break. Now she was very proud of herself. And Cedar Tree was proud too, but he told her that she should shut down her basket in the woods and leave it there. She must give her basket back to the earth to show that she was thankful for what it was given to her. Gray Squirrel didn't like that one bit, but Cedar Tree insisted that if she didn't give it away the basket, she would never be a good weaver. And she had to make 5 little baskets and give those away too. She must learn to work for others, not just for herself. Coyote was coming to the big river at that time. Cayusta continued finishing her story. He saw Gray Squirrel's fine basket and he was impressed with it. He told her soon that people would come into that part of the world. Already people were so close to that coyote could hear their footsteps. He says from that day forward, the women of the land would be so well known for their cedar baskets. And it's so, isn't it? Cayusta spread her strong, gnarled hands over her knees. One little girl gazed up at Cayusta longingly. Tell us another story, she said. Cayusta smiled. Instead, why don't you make a little twine basket like the one Kaya's working on? I'll start it for you, and she'll help you if you get in trouble. Won't you, granddaughter? Cayusta, Kaya said. She would do anything that her grandmother asked of her, but she hoped Swan Circling had heard how quickly she agreed to Cayusta's request. She wanted her friend to think well of her. It seemed that no matter what Kaya was doing, she had Swan Circling on her mind. The next morning, as Kaya stepped out of the stream where the girls had taken her their morning swim, she saw Swan Circling beckoning to her. The frigid air made Kaya feel like running and jumping with energy. She pulled her elk robe around her and hurried to meet Swan Circling. Tots may we, Kaya said. Tots may we, Kaya, Swan Circling said. The story your grandmother told us last night set me thinking. I have something I want to show you. Would you like to work with me today? Kaya said. If Cayusta says I may, I'll work with you. Run and ask her then, Swan Circling said. I'll be in the lodge. After Cayusta said that Kaya could work with Swan Circling, Kaya joined her again. Swan Circling was kneeling on a mat in a crowded lodge. Kaya knelt at her side and watched her untie the flaps of a large parfleche painted with triangle designs in red, blue, green, and yellow. Your mother's story reminded me of a basket I made when I was a little girl. My very first one, Swan Circling said. My first was awfully lopsided, Kaya said, but I gave it to Cayusta anyway. Swan Circling lifted out of her special ceremonial dress and moccasins from the parfleche and set them aside. Then she took out a little brown twine basket and handed it to Kaya. You can see my first basket's lopsided too. Kaya smiled at the lumpy little basket. She liked to imagine Swan Circling as a girl with small hands and big ideas. A girl just like Kaya. She was happy to be sitting at her friend's side. Didn't you give your first basket to your grandmother? She asked. Swan Circling nodded. I did. After she died, it was given back to me. I'm glad. The basket has taught me many lessons. Kaya turned it over. With her fingertips, she traced the weaving. Was one of the lessons to make your twining tighter? Swan Circling smiled. To pull the cord tighter was one thing I learned, but that wasn't all. I learned about patience, too. I was a very bold, headstrong girl. I thought there was nothing I couldn't do. But you can do everything, can't you? Kaya asked. Now Swan Circling laughed. Of course I can't. She put her warm hand on Kaya's knee. You see, I'd be watching my grandmother weave her baskets, and I was sure I knew how. I decided I was going to make those beautiful one just like hers. I got my basket started, but I made mistake after mistake. Finally, I made this pitiful little thing to show her. What did she say about it? Kaya asked. She thanked me, said I made a start. But I expected more praise than that, Swan Circling admitted. I remember I was pouting. I asked her why she hadn't corrected my mistakes, as if the lumps in the basket were her fault. Then she told me everyone has to have her own experience. Everyone has to learn their own lessons. Little by little, I understood that to make a mistake is not a bad thing. But I would be wise enough not to make the same mistake again and again. Kaya understood that Swan Circling wasn't speaking now of basket making. She was speaking of life. This was a chance for Kaya to tell Swan Circling about how she got her nickname, why enemies were captured her in Speaking Rain, and about her guilt for escaping without her sister. She could tell Swan Circling the truth. I've made mistakes too, Kaya said. Swan Circling waited for her to go on. But then Kaya lost her nerve. What if she told Swan Circling the truth, but her friend lost respect for her? If she did, she wouldn't seek out Kaya anymore. No, Kaya couldn't risk losing Swan Circling's friendship. I left holes in a basket I was making, Kaya said in a determined voice. But my grandmother showed me right away so I could do a better job. She handed back the clumsy little basket. Swan Circling repacked it with the other things and tied the parafletch. Is something troubling you? She asked Kaya. There's a crease right here. She put a fingertip between Kaya's eyebrows. Kaya didn't meet Swan Circling's gaze. No, nothing's troubling me, she said. Still, Swan Circling waited. After a moment, she put the parafletch back on a stack against the lodge wall. Maybe we've done enough talking, she said. Come on, let's pack up the pemmican and put in the storage. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.